Welcome back. Now, the Sanlam ESG Barometer B20 Policy Impact Report has been unveiled, said to be a roadmap to capitalize on Africa's G20 moment. The report examines the implementation of B20 recommendations, the role of business in driving sustainable impact, and the pathways to inclusive growth. At the launch, I caught up with the Sanlam CEO, Paul Hanratty, to unpack what business is looking for from a policy perspective.
It's obviously crucially important because the whole point about B20 is for business to make recommendations and to some extent consistent recommendations over time that can advance the agenda of growth, economic prosperity, which of course in turn is good for business. And so that is about creating sustainability. Now ESG is a very particular lens that has historically been applied, and I think ESG is one aspect of sustainability. So clearly there's a very strong link between these two, and this year's Sanlam ESG Barometer has had a bit of a change of focus. So normally what we do is we have a look at how well ESG is working in the corporate environment. Is it actually making a difference, or is it a tick a box exercise? This year, with South Africa and Africa's involvement in leading the B20, we've had a look to see how good and how sustainable and how implementable are recommendations that have been made over the years, and what leads to them generating sustainable and improved outcomes for business. And we would argue, what's good for business ultimately is also good for broader society.
Okay, now on ESG specifically, you've said something very, very interesting, that we actually don't really look at the G a lot. It's always about the E especially, and then S, but the G is largely ignored, and you actually say that we should get to a point of really honing in on the G so that everything works. Just talk to me about that perspective.
Look, I think in big corporates, G is generally, not always, but generally well applied. So we've got some very shameful incidents, obviously, in the private sector that we don't need to go back to. But I think most companies apply the G quite well, and so it gets sort of brushed aside. And ESG has become a focal point for a lot of advocacy groups, environmentalists and so on. And actually I would say that climate tends to be the predominant focus. But the reason that I speak about G being so important is, remember, we're not talking about ESG just applying to the corporate sector. This applies to all of us. And what we see in Africa is a huge amount of weak governance. And weak governance leads to leakage. And leakage undermines economic growth, it undermines prosperity, and the people it hurts the most are the poor and the young. So if we could shrink the leakage that's going on through much better and improved governance, we would see better economic growth, better better outcomes for the youth, and just for society in general. So I think it's really important that we don't just somehow lose the G in this conversation. And I think for South Africa, if we focused on one simple thing, getting rid of the leakage in our system, get rid of corruption, get rid of crime, let leaders set standards of ethical behavior, taking care of every penny as if it was your own penny and not letting it seep away. This is really crucially important to make a difference.
Well, as you're talking about that leakage, I mean, we also want very strong alignment between all the stakeholders, business, government as well. And I'm wondering, as South Africa, as we sit in the presidency of the G20, in terms of building that trust, that solid trust between all the stakeholders, are we a good example?
Sorry, are we?
Are we a good example?
I think, look, in many ways we are a good example. So I think what we've achieved as a country in South Africa is absolutely incredible. So could we have done better? Of course, right? The Springboks have won the World Cup two or three times in a row. Could we have done? Well, we could have won by more, right? So there's always room for improvement. But if you think about where we've come from, the infrastructure that's been built, the houses that have been built, the extension of services to people. So a lot has been achieved, and I think we do keep coming back and working together. But it doesn't mean that we can't improve things. So I think there is room for improvement. And the point about these sort of exercises is to hone in on where are the areas that we need to get better at.
Okay, so there are lots of ideas from the B20, right? And what was outlined is that few recommendations of the B20 actually go into G20 policy impact and real world change. How confident are you that what business wants to change, particularly as an African voice, will outlive our presidency?
I'm super confident that a few things will make it through. Because what's interesting is when I started out in this B20 process, although it's a global process, you obviously try to bring more of the voice of South Africa, Africa, and the emerging markets to bear on it, because it's centered on us. But things that we thought were unique problems or unique issues for us turn out to be equally important globally. And here I would highlight the youth. So the one thing we know about Africa and the emerging markets in general is we've got a very young population. That brings its own challenges: unemployment, education, how do you equip them for the future, and so on. But actually we're now seeing in mature economies massive problems pertaining to the youth. So as a world, if we want to get stability, economic growth, social justice, we cannot exclude the youth. I mean, I saw today that in Europe, 1 in 6 people between the ages of 16 and 24 are not in employment and are not in education. 1 in 6. Right? So yes, we have a problem here in Africa, but this is not unique to us. So I think what we've uncovered is that things like the youth are urgent issues that need to be addressed. And if we don't address them, we will not see political and social stability across the world. So I am pretty confident that a lot of what we're putting forward, will have effect. And one of the big focus areas we had was around digital and the platform economy. Again, this is a very expanding area of economics and business around the world. So it impacts everyone. And I think a lot of the recommendations we've made will take foot. But 1 year's B20 or G20 shouldn't be seen in isolation. There has to be a continuity from 1 year to the next. So we've worked very hard to build on the work of the previous Brazil B20. And we're hoping that when we hand this over, there will be some continuity. And I think if we look at it in a longer term trajectory, quite a few of the recommendations will bear fruit.
That was Paul Hanratty, CEO of Sanlam.